Hi there. Welcome to another installment of MSP Webinars. I am your host, Steve Taylor, and today I'm joined by Danny from ThreatLocker. If you are not familiar with ThreatLocker, it's actually a really neat whitelisting security program. And Danny, I've got some questions for you on security type stuff before we kind of dive right into a demo, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's no problem at all. Thank you for having me, Steve.
Absolutely. So first of all, Danny, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
My background, my original background is in corporate IT. I spent many years building global networks, firewalls, routers, and working in the IT security space before it was called cybersecurity. Um, uh, Post that, I became an entrepreneur, and I have been an entrepreneur for quite a amount of time. I built two email security companies previously and sold them both. And 3 years ago, we started working on this ThreatLocker project, which was the idea was to build an application whitelisting solution that doesn't have the traditional overhead of traditional whitelisting.
Excellent. So now, okay, so for those of you that are members of MSP webinars, shameless plug, I'm sorry. Yesterday, we had one of our members take us through one of our monthly mastermind sessions, and he kind of showed us how some of the more advanced I don't know if hackers are the right term anymore these days, but he showed us one of the more advanced exploits that can take place, and basically he was showing us WMIC, WMIC. I'm sure most of you guys are familiar, if not all of you, with WMIC, right? So he was showing us WMIC, where it was invoking WMIC to then talk to a website and run Mimikatz, all being done with like base 64 instead of just regular old code. So the way that it was being done, and I'm not going to name names on a public webinar. I'm not trying to get anybody sued, but basically, we had a very popular antivirus firewall, fully patched Windows 10 running on a non-local administrator, an unprivileged user. And even though this user had like no rights to do anything on the computer, this thing still ran. So I'm really curious to see when you do the demo what ThreatLocker is able to do to prevent some of this stuff. Because my assumption, and actually, look, Zach is one of our attendees. My assumption is that ThreatLocker by default would allow WMIC because it's one of those like built-in like command shell type things on Windows. Am I wrong there?
Okay, so correct and not correct. in that, so ThreatLocker has two products, two components to our product, and one of them is our application control, and the other one is our storage control product. Both of them also work together, which we'll go into more detail. The application control breaks down into two sections as well. One is what we call whitelisting, or what is known as whitelisting, and that is a simple yes, thumbs up, thumbs down. Can this application, can this DLL, can this script file run? And then the other part of it is our ring fencing part, which is made up of a few parts. This is our newest edition. Most of it is fully deployed. Some of it is still in beta. And it really is about controlling what applications can do what. So things like PowerShell and other scripting, other parts of the Windows operating system, like WMIC, that would be allowed traditionally, you can essentially say what is allowed to open them. So if you were to say, okay, PowerShell is on the allow list, but only opened by either this user or this process. So one of the common viruses we see now is I wouldn't say common, but becoming more common is a PowerShell script being launched by Microsoft Word. That PowerShell script can then crypto locker things and do various other things. With the ring fencing, you can essentially say, I'm going to ring fence the Office or the Word application to, first of all, only be able to open the following programs. So you can say, you can open other Microsoft programs, such as, or Office programs such as Excel. You can open DLLs that are related to Office, but you're not allowed to open PowerShell. So you essentially can ring fence that Office application, say it's limited on what it can do. The other part of it is you can also limit it on what it can access. Right down to the document, any kind of storage devices. So if you have a file server, you can say, this application is not allowed to access my file server. This is the newest stuff we're actually doing, and that's in beta, where you can't access my file server and you can't access certain document types even. So let's just say you had Adobe, or no names, Acrobat, the reader program, the PDF reader program, and you didn't want that program. I've said too many names anyway.
I think that's okay. I just didn't want to say anything negative about an AV product. So I think you're okay talking about, Adobe Reader and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so say you're running Adobe Reader, you could actually say, well, Adobe Readers are legitimate applications, we want to run it. But first of all, we don't want it opening other programs. And secondly, we only want it to access PDF files. We don't want it to CryptoLocker our file server. And if it gets exploited, we only want it to access .pdf files. So if somehow this process gets exploited, then its damage is massively limited to the type of document it can access. And that's the newest part of what we've got in ThreatLocker, where you're actually tying it down. Well, you could do it before, but now you can do it from the application control, where you're tying it down to say this type of file can only get accessed by this. So if you do run a program and you say, well, I really want to get into enterprise level security, where if something happens that this application is ring fenced and it can only do this much damage, so it can't run PowerShell, it can't run command prompt, it can't run Wimic, it can't run, and it can't, even if Adobe manages to release an exploit themselves because someone hacks their servers like they did with the AV product that was, or the AV product add-on that was well known. If they actually hack the Adobe servers and Adobe releases a deployment that's signed and everything, then in that case, that program is ring fenced to only be able to do certain things. So the amount of damage you can do to your system is massively reduced.
Interesting. Okay. Well, very cool. Security always makes my brain hurt. And I think the reason for that is because, that whole onion thing, there's so many layers you have to have anymore that it's exhausting. It's exhausting, Danny. So talk to me about what security looks like for you and your team at ThreatLocker as a corporation. How do you manage your own security as a business?
Okay, I'll speak to the limitation I can speak to, and I'll say that because certain things we won't disclose on what we do and what we don't do. We are DFARS compliant, so we have to follow all of the NIST standards from top to bottom. But yes, security is a multi-layered approach. Just before this call, we had our global sales and marketing director had to request permission to run Zoom because we don't allow it. And it only took in 10 seconds to request and get approved permission. But we do have, the typical layered approaches, as you'd expect, the web security, the file security, the email security. We have restrictions in place on who can access what data. Fundamentally, as a security guy, I always say least privilege is where I start. So you should have access to only what you need to have access to. So we take a lot of steps. So if something does happen, not just from a viral or a malware or a hacker point of view, but rogue staff, rogue employees, people who leave the company, we want to make sure that they've got the least amount of privilege that they need to do their job.
Neat.
And we do that in a few ways. We use traditional tools, firewalls, web security products, email security products, but we also obviously use the ThreatLocker suite of tools to protect our own environment. And that includes protecting laptops out on the road, sales guys who are in transit, remote employees, and in-house employees.
Now, as far as endpoint security, is ThreatLocker the only security application that your endpoints are running?
So we do use the built-in antivirus, but we are very confident with our own product, whereas we use it as our complete protection against malware and viruses. Obviously, we have personal firewalls and things like that, but in terms of endpoint security, in terms of anti-malware, outside of the built-in Microsoft product, we rely on ThreatLocker to control all of our viruses and malware and make sure nothing unauthorized is running on the machines.
Now, gosh, it has been so long. So you actually gave me the opportunity to test ThreatLocker on some endpoints, and it was actually really interesting. So it wasn't just deploy it and turn it on and we're done. Like it was deploy it, and this was the application whitelisting. At the time, you didn't have the storage component, or at least I wasn't aware of it.
No, that's correct. The storage component is new, as is the ringtone.
So with the application whitelisting, it was like a process. We install it, and it's in just audit mode. It's not doing anything other than looking at all the applications that the end user runs throughout your day-to-day operations. And I think you suggested I keep it in audit mode, wasn't it, for like a week or two?
Yeah, so and those have changed the guidelines a little bit, but typically most clients run in audit mode for a week.
Okay.
We have had clients get up and running and have it out of audit mode in 2 hours. Normally clients who are in a desperate need to control what's going on, so they're in the middle of either they're deploying things fast, like so a school might be getting laptops out quickly for the beginning of the year, or also they just want to get everything locked down so they can stop any more damage from various problems and hacks they've had. But mostly it's typically a week, 2 days to a week is typical.
Okay. And it sounds like it depends more on, do people maybe only do a certain thing on Fridays or that kind of thing?
Yes.
That way we want to make sure that we're getting the whole picture. But if they don't have just certain things that they do on a certain day of the week or of the month or something like that, then it might be fine to just do an audit for 2 or 3 days, is what it sounds like.
Yeah, and in addition to that, we built in I can't remember if it was in there when you guys tried it before. We built in the base file scanner, so we get a snapshot of everything on the core operating system drive. So we know what's installed before you even open it. And the thing that people are running on Fridays is more related to things that are running from external devices, network drives, and things like that. So we were able to reduce a lot of whereas before, originally, we used to just rely on the audit to see what people were running. Now we actually rely on what's there. Then we can create suggested policies for you. And then you can go in and say, you know what, I don't like that suggested policy. Perfect example, we had a client 2 days ago who said, wow, who's running Opera in my network? And they shut it down. So it found that they were running Opera. He said, no, I don't want Opera running. And he just put the policy into deny mode immediately. We see that one, not so much
cool.
Opera, we see Spotify and other things that people want to shut down, not necessarily viral or malware, but things that people just want to shut down because they don't want it running on their network.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I don't want people streaming stuff. I mean, and I think I take for advantage of where I'm at in the country. I've got 200 meg internet, and it's bandwidth isn't an issue, but maybe some more rural settings where they only can get a few megabits per second, or maybe they have to rely on satellite and they're limited to so many megs or gigs per month of bandwidth. So I could see why controlling what applications are allowed to run, no Spotify, done. Like that's awesome. Now, why do we care about that? Like, couldn't we just go out and get a fancy firewall and say, just don't let anyone go to Spotify.com?
Of
or
course.
Don't let anyone go to YouTube.com.
Of course. And actually, this only stops you running the software. It doesn't stop you going onto their website and going to YouTube.com. It just stops you running any software that is associated with that. So in terms of bandwidth, one is, yes, you can block it from the firewall level. What it doesn't do, and this specific client actually did have bandwidth issues, and they did want to shut it down because of bandwidth issues, and they could have done it, you're correct, at the firewall level, but they didn't engage ThreatLocker to get control of Spotify.com. They got engaged ThreatLocker for 2 reasons. One is to get control of malware. which is the primary version most of our clients engage us, is how do we actually stop malware? We can't keep getting it whether it be every 2 months or every year or every 2 years. We need to make sure we got control of this. And the other reason was to get control over users just installing and doing whatever they want on their computer, and then expecting the IT department to deal with it. Now, in the smaller businesses where you have 10 employees, typically the IT department is the managed outsource company, and they don't have the right to say you can't install Spotify. They can certainly give advice and guidance. And in those cases, it's not likely that they're going to be able to do that. But in a lot of our clients, which are the thousands of seats, where have corporate structured IT, users cannot be downloading and installing what they want. There are licensing implications, there is malware implications, and then there's just the IT guy has to support this. And these are computers that are ran by multiple users, and shared resources in many cases, like terminal servers or Citrix servers.
Okay. So for those of you joining us on YouTube or partway into the interview here, I'm joined with Danny from ThreatLocker. And we've just been talking about security and the difference between ThreatLocker's whitelisting application versus traditional security solutions that you're used to. And Danny, for your own company, you even said so yourself, you still have a multi-layered security solution. So you've got, the nice fancy UTM firewall, you've got your mail content filtering, you probably have some web content filtering, and then you have ThreatLocker as your primary security application on the computers. Is all that accurate so far?
That's correct, yes.
And then real quick, there's a question here in the chat. Zach said, so here's a question. Does this command make you uneasy? And I'm actually going to, let me type this out here for you guys. So I just popped that into the closed caption so that way you guys can see the command that I'm referring to.
And I'm just looking for this file, this scrobj.dll. Is that a Windows file? I'm not familiar with it, or is it actually a third-party viral file?
That is a great question.
I can get a quick answer on Google. I
will personally respond, Zach. No, it doesn't make me uneasy because I have no idea what it does. He said it's a fake DLL to pivot through to bypass application whitelisting. Wow.
So, okay. Fake being it's a DLL on the internet that can be downloaded.
Or are you actually saying that the file doesn't even exist? You're just typing anything in. You just punched in gibberish.dll to make it do what you want it to do. So really, I think what he's asking is, does this command make you uneasy? And what it's doing is it's invoking a non-existent DLL, but what it's really doing is that /i:/URL. That's probably the scary part, because now you've got it adding something to your, is that registry? No, it's registering a DLL. It's actually just going to run something at a URL. It's a payload that regserver32.exe will run as the DLL. So yeah, I mean that's scary now that I understand it better.
I'm going to have to revert on that as to whether it scares me. From what I understand, you're saying that the URL is the downloader to download the bad malware.
Mm-hmm.
In which case, I'm not particularly scared of it at all. That said, I will go off and I will investigate it. I will find some typically, well, one of the things that it may be is that application whitelisting quite often only refers to executable files. So if you were to download a file from a URL into a DLL, it would permit that DLL. Or I'm trying to see what registry key is actually being changed here. oh, this is actually, someone's just posted in an actual URL.
So I think a really fun test, and here's where you almost put your money where your mouth is. Danny, will you run this this mystery thing here and see if it actually is being stopped by ThreatLocker? Live on YouTube. We have no idea this is happening.
Okay. So you want me to run this in command prompt?
Yeah, and you'd have to share your screen, don't forget.
I can't. I'm not sharing my screen. Here's the interesting part. It's not being blocked. It's being blocked by Windows Defender.
Okay.
So
that's right. You did mention that you have Windows Defender installed alongside ThreatLocker.
let me share my screen. So
do you have advanced threat protection version of Windows Defender, or is it just the standard free one that comes with Windows?
it's the standard free one that comes with Windows. Now it also got blocked by Symantec. So on my demo machine, not on my, and we'll talk about that. So if I can bypass it, it would be interesting.
And for those of you that are curious as to what this command does, Zach, you said that this is actually simply just going to run calc.exe. And I see this is by Red Canary Company on GitHub. Red Canary is one of the bigger names in MSSPs, if memory serves correct. Managed Security Services Provider.
And it doesn't run calc. I'm trying to see if I can disable Symantec. Am I sharing my screen?
No, you're not.
How do I?
That's that green button down there on the bottom. Hey there. I see we have another person that just popped in. Don't be afraid. I'm not gonna attack you or anything. We're here with Danny from ThreatLocker, and Zach just asked a really cool question. Is ThreatLocker going to protect us from this really scary looking script that I just put into the chat? Zach said it's going to run calc.exe. I don't know. Zach doesn't seem very trustworthy, if you ask me. I mean, I don't know. I think he's actually going to steal
I'm running
all of your credit card numbers with that.
PM environment as well. So I'm intrigued to know. How can I find? There must be a way of disabling Windows Defender for a moment. Windows Defender, actions needed. Everything's off. How is it still blocking it when everything's off?
There actually isn't, he said.
I have a huge. Let me just share my big screen for the moment. Share screen, and here's what's interesting. Where can you see my screen? You see a small screen or one with PowerShell?
I see a Windows background. Okay,
let me drag it onto that screen there. So now here's what's interesting. So Windows Defender popped that up. This has Windows Defender has. Where's my home screen on Windows Defender?
He said try running it. So that's the other thing. We've noticed that PowerShell is more secure than command prompt.
Okay, so
run that in command prompt. You might have. I don't know if we're going to consider it better luck or worse luck.
No, well, I get access is denied still, and I don't know if it's been denied by Windows. But this is running calculator. It's not. Is it downloading calculator and running it, or is it running calculator?
I think it's just downloading a script which will tell Windows to start calculator.
Okay, so it's not actually downloading any aggressive code either. And Symantec blocks it on this machine, and I can't turn that off. That's the wrong screen again. I have to keep switching screen. So here's Symantec on my VM, and I can't turn it off.
Okay. Well, we tried, but Zach, your code just isn't. It's too fishy. Is the problem, Zach? So no, your code doesn't scare any of us.
So I can't see Zoom again. Where is Zoom? I need to get this screen shared so I can share my proper screen.
Here, there you go.
There you go. Pop up there. So I have too many windows open here.
So I think now is a good time if you want to just kind of run us through your proper demo, because I think maybe that'll shed some light for Zach as to kind of how ThreatLocker works, what it's capable of, what it's not capable of, and
Okay. Okay, and by the way, I will do a follow-up on this if you don't mind. I will go off
absolutely.
and find out I will get a machine and I will disable everything somehow. I'll probably use a Windows server rather than the PC to find out if it actually blocks it. But let's take it from here anyway. So there's 3 parts to ThreatLocker, or 2 parts to ThreatLocker. One is our application control. The prime purpose of the application control is to first decide what can and cannot run. And that includes batch files and DLL files, executable files, what applications can and can't run, period. A black or a simple whitelist, or you can use it as a blacklist as well. The second part to it is what these applications can do, what documents can they access, and what other applications can they spin off. And we have a demo environment here, and we do have a separate demo, which I'm happy to show at another time as well, where we show how ThreatLocker helps with things like Windows vulnerabilities, and not in response to vulnerabilities, but in response to the way we ring fence things. So we have a demo where we take control of a unpatched Windows 7 machine, and we essentially get command prompt access as an admin by exploiting the print spooler service. And then firing up command prompt as a print spooler. In that case, that's the eternal blue vulnerability that allowed you to get access to things. So we do have a demo that shows how you do that. It does take a long time because I have to fire up a Kali Linux environment and a Windows environment, but we'll have to do that. But the second part of our product is our storage control. So what we wanted to do with our storage control is we wanted to give people access to control first of all, audit what's happening on their storage devices, both devices that they connect to their machines, such as USB drives, secondary hard drives, or card readers or things like that, but also on things like NAS file servers. If your laptop connects to a file server on the network, what's actually happening on that? And we wanted to give you as an administrators control as to not only what storage devices can be used, but what can be done on them. And I'll go into more detail. For example, what applications can write to those storage devices, what types of files can be written to those storage devices, and things like that. So that's the overview. Before I actually go into the demo, I want to, and I think everybody probably understands this, but I want to really reiterate why antivirus sucks. And we do have an antivirus on this machine, and I'm not. It's a very popular business antivirus. It's the full suite. Everything is turned on. I'm not going to disclose its name. I will do it confidential, but not in the webinar. And essentially, and I've put some bypasses in ThreatLocker to get around this. And I have a demo here. So in my environment here, I have a little fake file server, which is a couple of documents actually looped back to the same computer just for my demo purposes. But the idea is it's a fake file server, and it's got some files. I have a computer here in Northern Virginia in AWS that I've remote desktops to. This computer is not on this network. It's got no trust or no link to this network. It's just a computer with a web port open in Virginia. You can see here there's an empty folder. I then have a Word document here. And what's going to happen when I open this Word document is it's going to go off to the internet and it's going to download a piece of malware, and it's going to copy all of the data from the file server, and it's going to copy it up to that file server. Now, I will say the first time I ran this Word document, it did give me a macro warning, and it doesn't give me it since then because I nailed it. So it's worth noting that. But what's really interesting is, despite the macro warning, which I'm sure we can all agree, at least putting it nicely, half of our users will click enable on. It does allow this software to run, and it does allow this to copy up to my server in Virginia. So there you go. You see my 4 fake files copied onto the file server here. And there's no smoke and mirrors here. This is a little piece of malware that I wrote in a couple of hours for the purpose of demos 3-4 months ago, and we've been using it for demos ever since. And we've tested it with various antiviruses, and it pretty much gets around most of them. There are a couple which we had to make some changes, and there's some custom versions, but it's very, very easy to get around the antiviruses with this piece of malware. And the reason this is a problem is, is mainly because antivirus works on a blacklist basis. Yes, they have some algorithms and some heuristics and looking at certain things, but ultimately they work on, we want to try and stop this exact behavior. And it could be based on a file hash, or it could be based on something it's doing that they know is viral-like. So that brings me on to how we help. So I'm going to fire up my portal here now, and I'm going to log in. Of course, the one time I logged in took a long time. So some of you are familiar with our portal, and some of you aren't. We have a cloud-based service. It's a cloud client service, so we don't require a server or anything else to be deployed in-house, just a client on the machines. When you sign up for our service, you essentially get given a login to our portal, and you have the option to create clients of your own. As a partner, you get this organizations tab. In the organizations tab, you can create new customers yourself, and you can click on them and manage them. So if you want to create a new customer here, pick a time zone, whatever's closest to my house. You can pick what products you'd like to enable, and then you can click on them and manage them without having to log in as them, as they are your own client. Once you've created a customer deployment, we've tried to make it as easy as possible. So we don't want you to have to do too much. So the first step after you've created the customer is you pick a group, or you download, or you create a new group, and you just click download. And it downloads an MSI specific to that group. When you run the MSI, it's essentially going to create a computer under the computers tab here. It takes about 15 seconds to run. You can push it out through any RMM system you have. I know Steve used Kaseya last time. So you can push it out. This is silent MSI, very, very easy to deploy. Once it's deployed, immediately, it's going to start logging everything that happens on your computer. Every single time a executable, a library is opened, and by who opened it. So if a user, if a user opens Google Chrome, it's going to get logged in here. So we'll just go into here, we'll search Google Chrome, and we can see who opened it, what computer, what date, what time. If we look at the properties of it, we can see any certificates, what the hash of the file is, what the process that opened it is, and what the path is. So you're going to start seeing that logged immediately. We have a special deal for MSP webinar subscribers, where if you want to make use of this audit, you can download and install this audit on as many PCs as you want. It doesn't cost you anything. You can continue to use it. So if you want to know what's running on your client computers, even if you don't want to control it, you can do this free of charge as an MSP webinar subscriber. So a couple of, typically what happens at this point is your computer is going to get scanned. So over the next half an hour, it's going to scan your machine, and it's going to find base files. So it's going to basically scan all of the hashes, all of the certs, all of the files that are on your machine, and it's going to upload them to ThreatLocker. And then what we're going to do automatically, and this is configurable, but typically automatically, we're going to go off then and we're going to create policies based on what we found on your computer. So we're going to find all sorts of antivirus products, applications you've got installed, Office, Google Chrome, and we're going to try and match those applications with our built-in applications. Then we're going to find stuff that don't match our built-in applications. Like the Screencast-O-Matic V2, it doesn't match our built-in application, but we're going to say, okay, we found this, we found it on the computer, we've hashed the files. If they're certs, we've used certs from the files in combination with the path of the file, and we've created an application definition for you. And then we're going to create all these permit policies for you. This one here was my virus that I created an exception for, which I'm going to remove now. So we're going to deploy these policies for you. And then what we're going to do, typically a couple of days to a week later, at this point, everything's still monitoring. So you've installed it, you've done nothing, you've spent, if you're deploying it on at most an hour, but realistically 15 minutes to deploy it, and you're just going to wait at this point. And over the next, and typically what we recommend is a week later, we will come in and we will have a call with you, or you'll have a call with your client if you're familiar and you've used ThreatLocker quite a few times. And we'll go through, well, look, this is what we found. Is there any applications that you don't want to be running in here? So, you can say, oh, well, I don't want Join Me to be running. I don't think we should use it. And you can delete it from there, or you can edit it. So you can set the Join Me policy, and you can see here we've said Join Me is permitted, and it's got no restrictions. It's fully permitted. But you can come into here and you can say, well, I want to deny Join Me, and immediately that'll start denying that application. Now, I'm not going to do that because we use Join Me for our demo, so that wouldn't be too smart. And you can delete or change anything you want. The next stage is really checking, is there anything hitting the deny policy? So anything hit the default policy that shouldn't be. So we have this default policy, might be called deny on this computer, so I rename it. And we can see everything that's hit it. So here we'll see, and by the way, this is because it's been denied, Notepad++ isn't being allowed. Typically, what you're going to see in this page is you're going to see things like batch files that run on network shares that wouldn't have been on the computer-based files. You're going to see any programs you run off the network, anything that's running from the user's download folders or that we've deemed high risk, because we don't profile everything, but we profile most stuff. So there's normally a couple of items. The number of items you find in this page might be 10, there might be 20, there might be 30. They're never a substantial amounts. So you can then go in and say, okay, ThreatLocker hasn't added my net login script, so I want to permit those scripts. And there's a few different ways you can do that. You can right click here and you can either add them to an existing. So let's say, oh, well, I want to permit this file. You could add it to an existing application that's permitted. So I could say, I'm going to add it to this application here. And I can add, I can either add the hash, or I could say, you know what, I want to add that entire cert. And I don't care anything. If it's signed by this vendor, I'm going to trust it. Or you could add a combination of hash and cert, or a combination of path and cert, or just path, or whatever really meets your requirements. Typically what people do is that if they're signed, they'll use a combination of the cert and the path or something like that. If they're not signed, they'll use the hash. Quite often when you have things like net logon scripts, what will happen is what I see most administrators do is permit the entire net login folder, and assuming that that folder is secured and people can't write and dump whatever they want into it. But it really depends on what you'd like. So you could create a new application, or you can add it to an application. And then you can create policies around it. So there are 4 different layers of policies for managed service providers. There are the global policies, which is essentially anything that you create and assign to the global group in your own organization will apply to all of your children. So if you create a policy saying permit my software, permit Kaseya, permit this, it's going to apply to all of your clients. The next level is the entire organization. The entire organization essentially means when you create a policy, it doesn't matter what computer, what group, it's going to apply to everybody in that organization. So I have a permit Adobe Reader here for the entire organization. Then you have computer group policies. Sorry, I'm going to say the order slightly different. Then you have computer policies. So you can apply them to individual computers. And the reason I'm saying this in this order, and then you have group policies. The order they apply, and this may seem illogical, but there is a method behind the madness, is the global policies apply first, followed by the organizational policies, followed by the computer policies, and then the computer group policies. And typically in the computer group policy, that's where you have your default deny, or in some cases default permit policy, where you have a policy at the end that says deny everything that hasn't been permitted. So this is a typical scenario. We have a policy at the end. It's normally called default. This has been renamed for demos. And we can see here that the action is deny, allow a user to request permission when it gets blocked. email the admin when they request permission. So you'll get an email with a link so you can approve it. And here it says apply to this group of computers. There's no reason you can't put your default deny in the enterprise or the computer. Obviously, if you put it in the enterprise, any policies under the group are never going to apply because these run in order like firewall policies. When you create these policies, you can say what applications can run. Do they apply to all applications? What type of storage devices does it apply to? So if you want to say, I want to permit, here's an example, a client that just actually ordered today, they are a medical clinic and they have an X-ray machine computer and they keep getting CD-ROMs with X-ray software on it, and they have to run those X-rays. So they decided to permit that entire interface so they didn't have to keep allowing this different software. Now, when doing that, they expose a risk of someone putting a virus on a CD, but the risk versus reward was relatively slim for them. They were quite happy to take that risk. You can apply it to certain users and groups. We do have the new Active Directory sync tool in beta if you want to use groups as well. And you can even set temporary policies. So let's just say you want to allow a program like TeamViewer. I'm sure a lot of you guys use TeamViewer. It's a great program. You can use it to access remote machines remotely, do remote support, even copy files to and from computers without the user knowing. Well, that's great. But if it's not under your control, if someone else has installed TeamViewer, you want to make sure that it gets shut down at the end of the expiration time. And then you can say, if you want things to be logged. I don't know if any of you guys use Splunk. We have options here where you can actually audit detail into Splunk. So if a certain policy gets hit, you can send the results to Splunk or any syslog servers or things like that. So there are options we have on there. So the next part.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Will that work with other tools that do syslogging or just Splunk?
No, so we have a Splunk API, access to the Splunk API, and then syslog as well.
Okay.
So the standard syslog, and just to prefix that is also in beta. So I'm happy for anyone to try it, but it is a beta option at the moment because we're still getting a lot of testing on different servers.
And I ask because people are starting to take SOC services more seriously, and in order to have a SOC, a lot of times you'll see people utilizing a SIM and other, all sorts of different types of logging. And does the syslog data come from the agent or from your dashboard?
The syslog data comes from our dashboard. So it comes from our API. When the agent sends it to the dashboard, we have to have access to the syslog server from our data centers. So you have to add the IP address of our data centers into your firewall so we can talk to your syslog server.
Cool.
Yeah. So if your agents are out on the road as well, they report that data back in. So the next part of the application control, and this is in two parts. Some of this is built in and some of it isn't. So our ring fencing, for example, and we have that eternal blue vulnerability that the NSA sat on for 5 years and used to access computers. If anyone's ever played with it or tried with it, you can essentially install the exploit onto a Kali Linux machine or something, point it at an unpatched machine, such as a file server, and get full admin privileges to the server. Now, in no way do we suggest you do not patch your servers because you're running ThreatLocker, because what we're trying to do here is reduce risk. We're not trying to, we certainly don't annihilate the vulnerabilities and the risks associated with vulnerabilities in Windows. But essentially, by implementing our ring fencing, what we were able to do is we're able to look at these exploits and say, well, how are people using these exploits? How are they being exploited? So if we take the eternal blue vulnerability, what that did is it attached itself to the principal process or another Windows common process. It would then spin off either a piece of malware, which the whitelisting deals with, or even worse, a Windows process such as command prompt. So essentially, we have a demo and we can send it by video and publish it afterwards. It takes a while to set up and do, where you can, where we shows that what happens when they do that is it uses the principal to open command prompt. So we built in a whole bunch of core rules into our system that says, these are core Windows processes. These are relatively easy to manage. We know what they're supposed to do. And if they try and do something outside of that, like open PowerShell or open command prompt, we shut it down. So if you try and open the command prompt from the print spooler, it gets shut down. It says, no, you can't do that, because access is denied. It does not remove the vulnerability. It does not remove the need to patch your server, but it massively reduces an attacker's ability to do something in the event that they do get onto your server with a vulnerability. So that's just something extra. In addition to that, we can also say which applications can open which processes. So when you permit Microsoft Office, you say, well, what processes can Microsoft Office open? So can it open command prompt or PowerShell? Again, macro viruses becoming more common. If you say Office cannot open, you cannot open command PowerShell from Office, we actually block it down. It gets blocked down. So we have built-in rules into our applications. You can build in your own rules as well. So if you want to create an application and say, well, I want to permit access to Microsoft Office or this program. So we'll say whatever, putty.exe, putty test. We're going to say, okay, well, that's fine. Putty's allowed to run, but it's not allowed to run anything else. So you're not allowed to, you can say which process has to trigger this. So you can't open this application unless it's triggered by another process of my approval. So it can, maybe you might say, well, the only way you should ever open this application is through Windows Explorer when you double click on it, or through command prompt. And you can tie down the process that actually triggers the application or runs the DLL. So you can lock down certain files being open to certain processes. And then what we've done further than that, and this is a brand new feature, let me show you this. You can then go in and say, well, I'm going to give you access to an application, but I'm going to limit what the application can do. So like we said with Adobe Acrobat Reader here, we could say, okay, Adobe Reader is permitted, but I want to limit read and write access to only PDF files. So it can't write or read to anything other than PDF files. So if something gets done, you can also say path. So or if you just leave that blank, this is actually quite a cool feature as well. Let's say we use one of the big IT sites, forums, to do some posting for us, and they have this horrible web conferencing software similar to Zoom, but it works. It's a smaller application I haven't heard of before. And we noticed when they wanted to do the conference with us, we ran the software, we permitted it. We noticed that it was accessing our documents. Now, I have no doubt that they weren't trying to steal our documents, but I got very, very uncomfortable by the fact that this software was polling my documents and what it was doing. So you could actually just say, I want to remove, I want to limit access so it can't write or read to anything. So in that case, it's only that document. You know, it's really limited. So yes, okay, this could be a virus, but at least it's not going to be able to get on my file server and steal my data or encrypt my data. So the damage that it's going to do is going to be isolated to that machine. So you could restrict access like that as well. Now, you know, we have, now, in addition to the application control, we also extended our product to include the storage control. So storage control, like the application control, can give you a full audit of everything that's going on. So remember when I actually had that piece of malware that copied my my files up to the server in Virginia. This new text document is one of those documents. You can see here that admin on this PC accessed this file on the file server using this process. This was the policy that either permitted or denied it. So you get a full audit of everything that's going on. If I go onto my file server here, and I'll create a new document. Save it. I'll delete it. I can see, so I want to say that I want to know who deleted this file or who edited it. I immediately have access to this in here. I can see who opened it, what computer they used, and what document they edited. This is logging twice because essentially this is a fake file server and it looped back to the machine. But it also can run just on the file server. So if it runs just on the file server, then it will report which clients are doing what. What it won't report if it's running on the file server is what process accessed it. So that's the first part of it. Again, if I take this document and copy it to a USB drive, which I don't have, but we'll copy it to my G drive here. Then I can see, if I want to go back and I want to see what happened to test, you can see here, what did I copy? Obviously it wasn't test, new text document. You can see here that I wrote it to my G drive here. This is the serial number of the drive. It was a SCSI drive. So if you want to track who's copying data onto USB drives, you can see that. What I'll do, now then it gets a little bit more interesting. So because I'm using a Hyper-V VM, it's a little bit trickier to, I don't have a USB drive. But what I'll do is I'll block my G drive. So what I'm going to do is, then you can go in and you can say, well, I want to be smarter than that. I want to actually block down disks. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say on my, so I've got a permit there, so I'll delete that. I'm not sure what half the stuff is, but I'll delete it. So actually, you know what I'll do? I'll just delete all of that. So I'm going to say block all external storage devices. So what this is going to say, I want to deny any read and write to any storage device. It doesn't matter whether it's USB or a UNC or anything like that. So I'm just going to block that. I'm going to deploy my policies. Then give myself 60 seconds to deploy the DVD drive. It'll also work on, it's being blocked. Again, it pops up very easy. So I can say, oh, I need access to this drive or this UNC. So I can just say, okay, I want to request permission. Again, if the administrator is present, you can say, oh, I didn't show you this on the application control, so I will revert back to it. You can say, oh, I'm the administrator. I want to put a password in. You can see here that I obviously created this before. And I'm going to say, okay, I want to permit read and write for this drive based on the serial number for the entire organization. So if I go in there and say, I'm going to permit that, we'll see here that everything in the organization is permitted. Now I can get immediately onto it. And you'll see here in the policies, what it actually did was it created a policy saying for this device called test SCSI, which permit it. Now I could go in here and I could say, you know what, I'm going to permit this, but only for notepad.exe or only for picture files, or only, you know, if you have a Veeam backup service on your server and you want to block USB drives, you could say, well, you know, we had a client who'd have been crypto-lockered onto their backup server, and the backup had been crypto-lockered as well. So what they actually did, they created a policy to say that nothing is allowed access to USB drives apart from the Veeam process. So if they got some kind of malware on the server, it wouldn't be able to access the USB drive. So you can get really, really granular on what can be done and what can't be done from a policy perspective. You know, in set expiration policies, again, you can report this into Splunk if you have some kind of stock and you want to report into Splunk. The next thing, which I didn't show you, I'm going to just jump back a little bit to the application control, is one of the big problems with application control is, well, what happens when you need to approve something, especially for managed IT crowds, because if the customer wants something and it's going to be a big job for them, or they're out on the road, or they request permission, it's going to be difficult. They want to make it really, really easy. So just like the storage control I showed you there, you know, I've just tried to run putty here. Yes, putty's really, really easy example, and I'll get to a more complicated one in a moment. I can say, oh, again, the customer can just say, I want to request permission. The administrator will get an email, and also the approval request to go into here. So the administrator can approve it from here. And you can see here, the administrator can say, oh, this user's requested access to putty, which is signed by this vendor. And oh, it actually appears to match. We know what this application is, so you can match it. Or if we don't know what it is, you can create a new one on the fly, and then the administrator can just hit permit here. Again, if the administrator is on site, he can put his password in. And he can say, okay, I want to permit this for, I can say every computer or just the entire organization. So I can say permit, and immediately that gets permitted. So that's really easy. But one of the other problems people have is, well, what happens when I want to install software? Putty is great. It's one file. It's one executable. It's very easy. It's signed. But, an example, I was installing SQL Toolbelt. That was 700 files in SQL Toolbelt. What if I want to go off and install something? Well, that's easy too. One is, if it's blocked. And if it's not blocked, you can also say it's you're going to run. You can also run it from here, from the tray. And you can say, okay, well, I want to install this. I've already installed this in a previous demo, but let's do, and by the way, Notepad++ is built in, but just for the purpose of this demo, we'll install it. You can start this remotely as well from the portal. So if a customer wants to install something, you can start install mode on their behalf. So I could say here, okay, I want to permit this. I'm going to enable install mode. When I enable install mode, what it's going to do is it's going to allow me to install this, and then it's going to monitor all of the files that are created by it, all of the libraries, all of the executable files, what their signatures are, what their hashes are. So once it's installed, it's going to go off and create that policy automatically for you. So you don't have to worry about, well, how many files is it going to create? Do I need to permit them all? What are their hashes? Are they signed? If we go into here, so I hit finish now that I'm done, go into there, you'll notice there's a few options there where you could say, I want to be strict or I want to be relaxed in my thinking of install mode. And you can, and just to clarify what these mean, relaxed means it's just going to say, allow these files based on the path they're installed in. If you do strict, it's going to say every file must match the exact hash of the file. Whereas if you do moderate, it's going to use a combination of hashes and certs, depending if files are signed or if they're not signed, and based on file names and paths and a combination like that. So you can choose. Pretty much moderate works most of the time. If you're in a real strict environment where they say, if that file changes by 1 byte, I need to make sure that we don't approve it. So that's where the strict gets very, that's normally for environments that are very, very static, and you don't want to have any kind of auto updates on software or things like that. So that makes that really, really, the point behind it is trying to make it really easy for you to manage this.
This looks, it looks like you've made some big improvements since I've looked at this tool last, Danny.
Okay, well, thank you, and we have. So
I'm impressed. Is really what I'm saying. Zach, I know that you're kind of my big security advisor, if you will. I see Zach said that ThreatLocker greatly mitigates a lot of what he demoed for us yesterday. I'm curious, Zach, do you think, in your opinion, as an MSP business owner, ThreatLocker is a tool that you would think is, I don't know if essential is the right word, but do you feel like this is at least one that we MSPs should be looking at, is what I'm going to ask you. And hopefully he's got a moment he can pop something into the chat for me. Speaking of which, I know that you gave me pricing, and I know that we can't put that pricing into the wild, so to speak. I am going to pop that pricing into the chat, which is only visible to the people that are here on Zoom. Now, this price that I just pasted, is this our price as MSP Webinars members?
Yes, so that's your buy price as MSP Webinar members.
Okay, so that's the 35% off. That's the highest discount tier.
Yes, that's the highest discount tier. So as an MSP Webinar member, you get that maximum partner discount.
Okay. Could you pop into the price into the chat what the standard prices are? And then do you have like MSP partner pricing? And then is there like retail pricing?
Okay, so I will put the standard price based on, and that's into the chat if I can figure out how to get this chat open. So chat Q&A, is that it? Nope.
The one that's called chat here. This will make it a little easier for you.
Oh, there you go. Thank you.
It's to the right of the share button.
Okay, so the retail pricing on this is actually for the complete suite, which includes the storage and the application control. I'm gonna put the annual. So this is the monthly pricing and the annual pricing, which actually you end up getting a little bit more than a discount, and then the annual pricing is that for it. Now, MSPs don't normally do annual pricing. That's why I gave you the monthly pricing. So this is the full suite, and then each individual, if you wish to buy one module. So if someone says, I just want to manage storage or I just want to manage application, then the monthly is this, and the application pricing, the annual is this. I probably should have written what they were.
No, it's okay.
So,
the main reason I asked for that is because I am, for those of you that are members, I'm popping that onto the website, and it'll be nice and pretty when I've got it as a table, right?
Yes, and just the reason we don't discuss it is because partners need to be able to price this based on the services they offer around it and not themselves. So we want to make sure that the MSPs do not have clients saying, oh, you're charging me 5 times the price, because different partners charge different amounts depending on what they offer around it. Because quite often as an MSP, you're not just saying, oh, I'm selling you a product. You're saying, I'm selling you a service that includes this product.
Absolutely. And Zach said whitelisting is like the final prevention frontier. It is the most prevention method you can do. Now, preventative, I think, is the important part there. Is, how do I word this? Would somebody still need a SOC, Zach, if they're doing all this prevention? That's probably a very easy question to answer, and I bet the answer is yes.
Oh, apparently,
it's he put the prices in for all panelists. That's Cliff. There you go. Those are the prices: monthly, yearly for the full suite or for one of the 2 items. I think I said that correctly. So this is good, man. And Zach said no matter how good the whitelisting is, there may be some way to bypass it. So, we can get all the AV, and we can get the ThreatLocker and the UTM and the umbrella and everything, and we still should consider getting a SIM and a SOC to help us have a little bit more intelligence when it comes to reviewing the logs and looking for patterns that indicate something shady is going on in the background, that some of these normal products would not have caught because of the individual item of the overall pattern. Does that make sense, Danny?
Yes, absolutely. And I was going to answer, but I thought I'd let Zach answer. I mean, a SOC is incredibly important, especially when you have whitelisting, because someone has to make the decisions on who is running what and who isn't. But also, someone needs to make sure that people are actually running the processes, and that someone hasn't managed to remove the process and it's checking in. And we added some checks in here so we can see when computers last checked in, if people have somehow disabled ThreatLocker or turned it off. So you can go in here and you can say, oh, what's going on if something's missing.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for showing us this. I'm sorry if I cut you short on your demo, but we are over on time. Danny, I want to have you on again in the future. I think it would be really fun to have you and Zach both on to talk security, and let's see if Zach is able to, I don't know, do something that bypasses ThreatLocker. And not because I want to show that ThreatLocker is, some crappy software that nobody should buy. I don't believe that to be the case. I think that you have a very solid solution that people should consider. But But what I do want to make sure people understand, and I think you even understand it as the software creator, is no one software is going to protect a computer from everything.
That is correct. And by the way, I will post the results if I could actually figure out how to get Windows Defender disabled. I will post the results of this online, well, to you after this, because I've been sitting there clicking in the background trying to figure out how to get this disabled, even turned off.
No worries. And like I said, I think it would be fun to get, you and an MSP that is real security savvy on at the same time. And I don't know, maybe we get you and him, and then maybe some other security vendors. Maybe we have a security panel. Who knows? I just want to help, and sometimes a good debate is helpful. Sometimes seeing the limitations of an application is helpful. I think I think there's so many different ways we could go with this in the future, but I would love to have you back on, Danny. This is always fun to have you on.
I appreciate it, Steve, and thank you for taking the time to see our product. If anybody wants to just install a trial or anything, just visit our website. Make sure you mention you're on MSP webinars when you contact us, so we can get you the discounts.
Perfect. Hey, thanks so much, Danny. Thanks to everyone that took time to watch this. And I look forward to seeing you all again at the next webinar. You have a great one.
You too.